You have been told, probably more than once, that you need 8 hours of sleep. You have possibly felt guilty about it. I want to show you where that number came from. Because in 2015, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine put its name to a consensus, and that consensus does not say 8. It says 7 or more for adults with no upper limit, and that people differ. That is not a small correction. It is the difference between a floor and a target, between a thing you clear and a thing you fail. And it is one of several places where what the science established and what you were told have quietly come apart. In the next half hour, I am going to walk you through what sleep research actually proved in the order it proved it and show you exactly where the evidence stops, including the most famous finding of the last 15 years, the one about your brain washing itself at night, which a paper in 2024 found running the other way. Start in 1952. In a laboratory at the University of Chicago with a professor who had spent his career on a subject nobody else took seriously. Nathaniel Kleitman studied sleep at a time when the field barely existed. The prevailing assumption was simple, and it was wrong. Sleep was thought to be the absence of something. The brain switched off. The body idled. Nothing much happened until morning. There was no reason to watch, because there was assumed to be nothing to see. Kleitman gave a graduate student named Eugene Aserinsky a task that sounds almost too plain to matter. Go and watch infants fall asleep. Write down what their faces do. Aserinsky watched. And in the infants, he noticed something that should not have been there in a switched-off brain. The eyes were moving, not drifting, moving in sharp jumps under closed lids. So they moved to adults and wired them up and waited through the night to see whether the same thing happened in grown people who were unambiguously asleep. It did. 3 or 4 times a night, in bout after bout, the eyes jumped, breathing quickened, and the sleeper, if you woke them right then, reported a dream. On the 4th of September, 1953, that result was published in the journal Science. 20 adults, about 1.5 pages of text. 1.5 pages. That is the entire founding document of modern sleep research. The title was as dry as the field it created. Regularly occurring periods of eye motility and concomitant phenomena during sleep. Underneath the dryness was a claim that took the subject apart. Sleep was not one state. It was at least 2, alternating on a schedule all night in everybody. And the second one, the one with the moving eyes, looked on the instruments disconcertingly like being awake. That is the thing to hold on to. The discovery was not that dreams exist. Everyone knew that. The discovery was that dreaming has a timetable. A timetable can be measured. A timetable can be interrupted. A timetable can be compared between a healthy person and a sick one. Within a few decades, that single observation had grown into a clinical field recognizing dozens of distinct sleep disorders, most of which nobody could have named in 1952. None of which happened because somebody had a theory. It happened because somebody was told to sit in a room and look at faces and did it properly. There is a habit in science writing of treating that as a charming detail. It is not a detail. It is the method. Direct observation of a thing everybody assumed was empty by a person junior enough to be given the boring job. Keep that in mind, because almost everything that has gone wrong in this field since has gone wrong at the other end, at the point where a measurement becomes a headline. 15 years before the eye movements, Kleitman had already done the other experiment that this field rests on. And he did it, for reasons that will become clear, underground. In June 1938, Kleitman and a graduate student called Bruce Richardson went into Mammoth Cave in Kentucky and stayed for 32 days. 140 feet down, no daylight, no temperature swing. The cave holds around 54 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever the season is doing above it. They were not there for the geology. They were there because the cave removed every clue the outside world uses to tell you what time it is. And the question they had brought down with them was this: if you take away the 24-hour day, can a human being simply be reassigned to a different one? So they tried to live a 28-hour day, 9 hours of sleep, 10 hours working, 9 more resting, round and round for a month in the dark. And they took their own temperatures constantly because body temperature rises and falls on a daily rhythm, and it does so whether or not you are paying attention. Temperature was the readout. If the body could be reassigned to a 28-hour day, the temperature curve would stretch to match it. Richardson, who was 25, adapted. His temperature rhythm stretched out and settled into the new schedule. Kleitman, who was 43, did not. His body went on running close to 24 hours in a cave on a 28-hour timetable for a month. Now, and this matters more than the result does, that is 2 men. 2. You will see this experiment used to argue that younger people adapt to shift work better than older ones. 2 people cannot establish that. They can only raise it. What the cave did establish is the thing that actually mattered, and it is stranger than the age story. The rhythm did not come from outside. Strip away the sun, the clock, the temperature, every cue there is, and the body keeps producing a roughly daily cycle out of itself. The day is not something happening to you. There is a version of it running internally, and the outside world's job is mostly to keep correcting it. That is the finding that eventually turns into an entire discipline, the study of the body clock and of what happens to people whose work forces them to fight it. And it came out of 2 men, 1 cave, 32 days, and a thermometer. I keep saying the sample sizes out loud because you are about to see what happens in this field when nobody does. In December 1963, a 17-year-old in San Diego decided to find out what happens if you simply do not sleep. He was doing it for a science fair. His name is Randy Gardner. He is still alive, and he has spoken about it on the record many times since, which is the only reason I can tell you what it was like from the inside. He stayed awake for 264 hours and 25 minutes, 11 days and 25 minutes. He beat a standing record of 260 hours. What turned it from a stunt into a case study was who showed up. A Stanford sleep researcher, William Dement, came down to observe it. A Navy medical officer, Lieutenant Commander John Ross, monitored his health throughout. Research papers followed in 1965 and 1966. So this is not a legend. It is one of the most closely documented sleep deprivation events there has ever been, and it happened because a teenager entered a school competition. Here is what he has said about it himself. Physically, he did not have problems. The mental part is what went downhill. And the longer it ran, he said, the more irritable he got. That is a first-hand account from the person it happened to, and it is worth more than any summary of it, because summaries of this experiment have not been kind to the facts. The other number people expect is the recovery. How long do you sleep after 11 days awake to get it back? About 14 hours. Oh! Not a week, not proportional. Roughly 14 hours, and then he woke up groggy in the ordinary way, which tells you something quietly important about what sleep is doing. Whatever the debt is, it is not repaid hour for hour. You do not owe back the 11 days. Something in the system prioritizes, catches up on what it most needs, and calls the account closed. Guinness World Records no longer monitors this record. They stopped, and the reason is not mysterious. There is no safe way to supervise somebody breaking it. So the 11 days stands as a documented event that nobody is trying to beat, which is a rare and sensible outcome for a record. What I want you to notice is that this is, again, one person, one extremely well-documented person. You can learn an enormous amount from one person watched properly. You cannot learn a population from them. And the moment somebody uses Randy Gardner to tell you what will happen to you if you sleep 6 hours instead of 8, they have made exactly that jump. So, dreaming has a timetable, the clock is internal, and going without sleep degrades the mind before the body. What is sleep actually for? This is where I have to slow down, because this is where the evidence stops being tidy. There is a version of this episode that would now tell you sleep does 6 specific things, list them, and finish early. That version would be lying to you by omission. What exists instead is a set of findings of very different strengths, and the useful skill, the one you can take away from this, is telling them apart. Start with the strongest kind of evidence there is in this field, which is the kind where somebody deliberately infects people. In 2015, a study was published in the journal Sleep with a title as flat as its method: Behaviorally Assessed Sleep and Susceptibility to the Common Cold. 164 healthy adults, aged 18 to 55. For a week beforehand, their sleep was measured, not asked about, measured on the wrist every night. That distinction is the whole design. People are unreliable narrators of their own sleep. A device is not. Then they were put in quarantine and given nasal drops containing rhinovirus, the common cold, deliberately, and watched for 5 days to see who actually got ill. People who had been sleeping under 5 hours a night were about 4.5 times likelier to develop a cold than people sleeping more than 7. 5 to 6 hours, about 4.25 times likelier. And that held after accounting for how much antibody they already had, the season, their body mass index, their psychological profile, and their health habits. That is about as clean as human sleep research gets. Measured exposure. Measured sleep. A hard outcome you cannot talk yourself into. Now here is the part that never gets repeated. Oh, the same study looked at sleep fragmentation, waking up through the night, and found it was not related to catching a cold at all. Nothing. A null result in the same paper on the same people published in the same table. You have almost certainly heard the first finding. I would be surprised if you had heard the second. And that asymmetry is not a conspiracy. It is just what happens when a result is easy to say and a non-result is not. Which is why, when you next hear a study quoted at you, the question worth asking is not what did it find? It is what else did it find? Memory is the other place people expect a clean answer, and here I will be straightforward with you about the shape of the evidence. There is a large body of work indicating that sleep is involved in consolidating what you learned during the day. It is not a fringe idea, and it is not a settled mechanism. What I am not going to do is give you a number for how much better you remember things after sleeping, because the honest answer is that it depends enormously on what you learned and how it was tested. A list of unrelated words, a motor skill, and a piece of reasoning are 3 different tasks, and sleep does not appear to treat them the same way. A single percentage across all of that would be a summary of nothing. A documentary that gives you a percentage there is giving you one study's number dressed up as a fact about you. Now the big one, the finding that escaped the journals and became something people say at dinner. Your brain washes itself while you sleep. In October 2013, the journal Science published a paper from Macon Nettergaard's laboratory titled "Sleep Drives Metabolite Clearance from the Adult Brain." The claim was specific and it was beautiful. In sleeping mice, the space between brain cells widened and cerebrospinal fluid washed through the tissue more freely than it did when the animals were awake. And what it washed out included metabolic waste, among it amyloid beta, the protein that accumulates in Alzheimer's disease, a plumbing system for the brain running on the night shift. They called it the glymphatic system. It won the American Association for the Advancement of Science's oldest prize for the outstanding paper of the year. It deserved the attention it got. And within about 18 months, it had been compressed in public into a sentence that the paper does not support. Sleep prevents Alzheimer's. That sentence contains a species jump and a causal jump, and the paper made neither of them. Then, in 2024, Nature Neuroscience published a paper from Nicholas Franks and William Wisden at Imperial College London, and it pointed the opposite way. They tracked fluorescent dye moving through and out of mouse brains, and they reported that clearance was markedly reduced during sleep and under anesthesia. Reduced, not increased. They also reported that plain diffusion through the tissue did not care whether the animal was asleep, awake, or anesthetized. The authors wrote that their results challenge the idea that the core function of sleep is to clear toxins from the brain. 2 careful laboratories. The same broad question, opposite answers. 11 years apart. I want to be careful here because there is a lazy move available and I am not going to make it. This is not a story about one paper being exposed. Nobody has been caught out. The 2024 paper carries a published author correction of its own, which is what an honest record looks like. What has happened is that two groups measured clearance differently in animals and got results that do not agree, and the field is now arguing about which measurement means what. That argument is live right now. It has not resolved. Anybody telling you it has, in either direction, is ahead of the evidence, and the disagreement is not really about whether fluid moves through brain tissue. Everyone accepts that it does. It is about whether being asleep speeds that movement up, and how you would even measure the answer without the measurement itself disturbing the thing you are measuring. So the accurate summary is uncomfortable and short. We do not currently know whether sleep speeds the brain's clearance of waste, which is a very different sentence from the one that got printed on 1 million wellness posts. And notice what did not change while the science reversed. The advice did not change. The posts did not come down. The finding had already stopped being a finding and become a reason, a thing people reached for to justify advice they were giving anyway. Once a result becomes a reason, new evidence cannot touch it because it was never really doing the work of evidence in the first place. Which brings me to the part of this episode I have been building towards, and I am going to handle it precisely because it concerns living people and their professional reputations. In 2017, a book called Why We Sleep was published, written by the sleep scientist Matthew Walker. It became, by a distance, the best-known popular account of this subject. If you hold a general belief about sleep today, there is a reasonable chance it reached you through that book, directly or secondhand. In 2019, a researcher named Alexei Guzzi published a long public critique of it, and the specific allegations are what matter, so here they are. That the book's claim that sleeping under 6 or 7 hours doubles your risk of cancer is not supported by the evidence cited for it. That a World Health Organization declaration of a sleep loss epidemic, referred to in the book, was not a thing the WHO had declared. And that the National Sleep Foundation does not recommend 8 hours in the way the book described. Those are serious claims, and they were made in public with the passages attached, which is the right way to make them. Now the other half, which is reported far less often and belongs here just as much, an institutional review of the matter found some errors in the book, which the author said he intended to correct and found no research misconduct. Both of those things are true at once. Errors, acknowledged. Misconduct, not found. I am not going to tell you what to think about the book, and I am certainly not going to tell you what to think about the man, because the record does not support going further than what I have just read you. What I want is for you to see the mechanism, because the mechanism is the useful part, and it is not about him at all. A field produces careful, hedged, sample-limited findings. A popular account has to be readable, so the hedges come off. A headline has to be shorter than the account, so more comes off. A social post has to be shorter than the headline. By the time it reaches you, it is a number and an imperative. 8 hours. Or else. And at no single step did anybody obviously lie. Each step just removed the qualification that made the previous version true. That is why I opened this episode with the 8-hour number and why I want to come back to it now with the actual document in front of us. In 2015, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society published a joint consensus statement on how much sleep an adult needs. 15 experts, 12 months of work, 9 categories of health outcome, chosen because they had the best available evidence. Their conclusion, adults aged 18 to 60 should sleep 7 or more hours a night on a regular basis. 7 or more, not 8. And they explicitly declined to set an upper limit. They also wrote in the statement itself that individual need varies genetically, behaviorally, medically, environmentally. So the actual expert position is a floor with a spread around it. The version that reached you was a target you were failing. Those are not the same claim, and the difference between them is roughly the difference between information and anxiety. I would like to point at somebody for that. There is nobody to point at. It is what a true statement looks like after 4 rounds of being made shorter. So let me give you the thing this episode is actually for, which is not facts about sleep. It is a way of reading claims about sleep. Because you are going to encounter 20 more of them this year, and I will not be there, and the individual facts age badly. The reading does not. First question, mice or people? Both glymphatic papers, the 2013 result and the 2024 result that contradicts it, are mouse studies. That does not make them weak. Mouse work is how most mechanisms get found. It makes them unfinished. A mechanism demonstrated in a mouse brain is a hypothesis about a human one, and the gap between those has swallowed a great many confident sentences. Second question, how many people, and were they measured or asked? The cold study measured 164 people on the wrist for a week before infecting them. The cave study was 2 men. Randy Gardner was 1 teenager. All 3 are legitimate. They support completely different sizes of claim, and the size of the claim is the thing that goes wrong. Third question, and this is the one almost nobody asks. What else did the same study find? The cold study's null result on fragmentation is sitting in the same paper as the finding you have heard, and it has traveled nowhere because a non-result is not a story. When you only hear the half of a paper that made a headline, you are not reading the science. You are reading what survived being interesting. Fourth, is the claim a floor, a target, or an average? Those 3 get swapped constantly, and they mean entirely different things. 7 or more is a floor. 8 hours is a target. The distance between them is where the guilt lives. And 5th, the one that would have saved everybody the most trouble. How old is the finding, and has anybody checked it since? The brainwashing claim was 11 years old and enormously famous before a paper appeared pointing the other way. In that 11 years, it hardened into common knowledge. Common knowledge is the most difficult category to correct because nobody can remember where they got it, so there is no source to update. I want to come back to Kleitman for a moment because there is something in how he worked that the last 70 years keep proving right. He went into a cave for 32 days to remove one variable. He sat a student in front of sleeping infants for weeks to see what was there. Neither of those produces a headline on its own. Both of them produce the field. And the founding paper, the one that split sleep into states and started sleep medicine, was a 1.5 pages long, and its title was so dull that it tells you nothing. Compare that to how a sleep finding arrives at you now, and you can see the whole problem without me having to characterize anybody. There is a real thing under all of this, and I do not want the caution to leave you with the impression that nothing is known. A great deal is known. Sleep is not the absence of activity. That was settled in 1953 and has never been in doubt since. It is a structured, scheduled, internally generated state. The body keeps its own daily clock and will keep running it in a cave with no cues at all. Sustained short sleep tracks with measurable physical outcomes, and the cold study is the cleanest demonstration of that I know, because the exposure was controlled rather than observed. Going entirely without sleep degrades the mind faster than the body, according to the best documented case there is, in his own words. And a recovery is not proportional. 11 days out, roughly 14 hours back, that is a real body of knowledge, and it was built by people counting things carefully. What it does not include is a tidy single answer to what sleep is for. It also does not include permission for the 8-hour number as an obligation or for the brainwashing claim as a settled fact. Both of those went out into the world ahead of their evidence, and both are still out there, and neither is coming back on its own. So what do you actually take away from half an hour on sleep science? Not a schedule. I have deliberately not given you one, and I am not going to. 3 things you can use, all of which are about reading rather than sleeping. 1. A claim about human sleep built only on mice is a hypothesis, however famous it is. The brainwashing story is the worked example. 1 landmark mouse paper in 2013, 1 careful mouse paper pointing the other way in 2024, and no resolution yet. When you next see it stated as fact, you now know precisely which sentence is missing. This was measured in mice, and another group measured the opposite. 2. The published expert position is 7 or more hours for adults, 18 to 60, with no upper limit and with individual variation written into the statement. So if you have been carrying 8 hours around as a standard, you keep failing, the standard was never the standard. You can put that down. And you can check that one yourself. It is a public consensus document with 15 named experts on it, and it says what I have said it says. 3. When a study is quoted at you, ask what else it found. The cold study found that sleeping under 5 hours multiplied cold risk about 4.5 times. The same study found that waking up through the night did nothing at all. One of those crossed the world. The other stayed in the table it was printed in. Nothing was hidden. It just was not interesting. Do that for a year, and you will find that most of what you disbelieve is not false. It is true, with a qualification that got trimmed for space, which is a more useful skill than knowing any particular fact about sleep, because the facts will move and the trimming will not stop. Kleitman's student was given the least glamorous job in the laboratory. Go and watch some babies, and did it attentively enough to notice something nobody had reported. 70 years later, the same field's biggest public claim is one that most people repeating it have never checked the species of. The gap between those two things is not a failure of science. Science published both papers, including the one that undermined the popular story. It is a failure of transmission. And transmission is the part you can actually do something about because you are the last step of it. Every time you repeat a sleep fact, you are the compression stage. You decide whether the qualification survives. Sleep is one of the few things every single person watching this has done every day of their life, and we are still arguing about what it is for. That should be reassuring rather than alarming. It means the subject is still being worked on properly by people willing to publish results that embarrass the received story. The 2024 paper is the evidence that the system works. It is inconvenient, it is well done, and it got published anyway. What has not caught up is everything downstream of the journals. That lag is where nearly all of the confusion in this episode came from. Nathaniel Kleitman spent 32 days underground to answer one question about a clock. His students spent weeks watching infants to answer one question about eyes. Neither of them produced a rule you could put on a poster, and the field they built is still, 70 years on, the same shape, careful, slow, and much less certain than the version you were handed. If this episode has done its job, the next sleep headline you see will feel slightly different. You will find yourself asking how many, of what species, and what else did it find? That is the entire skill. It fits in one sentence and it works on every claim, not only the ones about the night. There is one more thing worth saying about the 8 hours, and it is the reason I put it first. Of everything we have covered, that number is the one doing active harm, not because sleeping 8 hours is bad, but because a 4 presented as a target manufactures failure in people who are fine. The consensus statement declined to set an upper limit and wrote individual variation into the text. Somewhere between that document and your phone, both of those disappeared. Now you know they were there. That is the correction, and it is the sort you can pass on. Next Sunday on The Better Self, the other thing everybody thinks they understand and almost nobody has checked the origin of: the gym, where the idea of training your body on purpose came from, what the Greeks were actually doing in the gymnasia, and how a philosophical institution turned into a monthly subscription. It has a stranger history than the sleep story, and a much clearer villain, which after today will make a pleasant change. If this was useful, the thing that genuinely helps is following the channel, because it tells the algorithm this kind of careful version is worth showing to somebody else. And if you disagree with any of it, particularly the part about the 8 hours, the comments are the right place, and I read them. I would rather be corrected in public than repeat something for another 11 years. Thank you for giving me half an hour of a Sunday. Given the subject, I hope you spend the rest of it doing considerably less than this. 7 or more, no upper limit, individual variation. That is the whole official position, and now you have it firsthand. I am Maja. That was The Better Self. Sleep well for whatever number of hours turns out to be yours.